A little bit of a difficulty with the making sure the camera was directed the right way, but it looks like it's fine. I see that Wally is here, Frank the Tank is here, and Laura Taylor all here with waffles. What a reception! Being welcomed with waffles. I can think of worse things. I do indulge in waffles from time to time, and I like them quite a bit. So I'll take that as a compliment. Oh, what are you doing, buddy? Okay, he's attached himself to my belt loops. Mr. Skeltel's here joining us, but I'm attached to the belt loops here. You know, I was just talking about you, Wally, in a good way, of course. One of the winners of the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas just claimed the second half of the prize, the $50 gift certificate. I just shipped it out today. And I was just thanking Kimberly for supporting the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas because you and Nanette are awesome. So just thought I'd bring that up. So got a few months before the next one comes up, everybody, but make sure you check it out if you haven't participated in the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas yet. Jungle Loft, hello. Monitor Plays, The Buggy Gal, Snails Ford, Coro Works, The Bug Hub, Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, Frank the Tank, Dope Critters. Yeah, I'm so happy to participate, Wally. It's always a cool thing to do. So thank you for inviting me. And then I usually do the two-part thing where I do the T-shirt and then I do the gift certificate. It seems to work out. People are liking that, so I'm glad. There's Kimberly Kitty as well. Oh, I did start the live stream a couple of minutes later, so that's my alarm. Sorry. He's really tied up in my belt loop, and I'm not going to stress him out. I'm going to let him climb out of my belt loop when he wants to. So that's the best way to do it, right? Don't want to stress him. Jungle Loft just got some Shiro Utsuris. Cool. Oh, Caleb likes snakes. Awesome. As do I, as you can probably tell. Probably tell. What's my problem with my mouth not working? The Buggy Gal's getting a pied ball python. Cool. Cool. Young lads there as well. Great. We've got 23 in here and 8 likes on my screen at least. So hit that like button if you haven't already. Kevin, which snake was that? Was that your boa that got tangled in your shirt? Oh, that's fun. You know, I'm really excited, just speaking of snakes, that for a couple of things, snake-wise. One, my melanistic garters are getting bigger, and I do think they're going to be breeding size. I think the males are already breeding size, and the females are close to breeding size. So I think this spring we're going to have babies from my melanistic garters. I also am excited that my wife wants a super dwarf or dwarf reticulated python. It's going to be a while because we're going to need to have a place to put it, and we don't have one right now. So we're going to need to get an enclosure all set up. But so it's probably a couple of years down the road, but she wants one. I'm so excited about it. The last time I was down with Clint of Clint's Reptiles it was last month in June, I got to hang out with Athena, one of his super dwarf reticulated pythons, and it was awesome. So Kevin, it was your corn snake. Okay, cool. Caleb, you have an 18-foot anaconda. That's awesome. And Kevin's getting the Similis. Yeah, those are the blue, one of the blue garters that are out there. I guess there are 2 or 3 different types of garters that often are fairly blue, right? There's the Florida blue. There's the Puget Sound. Is the Puget Sound the Similis? Sometimes I get the common names and the scientific names a little confused. When I used to live right near the Puget Sound, and I saw some of those when I lived there, and I didn't know what they were. I knew they were garter snakes. At least I suspected it, but I didn't know what kind. They were beautiful. So Natty the Panda, a new type of roly-poly discovered called the Singapore Tiger. Interesting. Therapod Hunter, hello. Looch, there's Looch as well. So Monitor Plays, you bought Vulgari Gem Mix, but I got nothing but magic potions and a single wild type. That's a little weird. I would expect to see a bit more variety in a gem mix, to be honest. So Aaron Boggs, my girlfriend wants a beautiful spider. Any recommendations that are fun to hold? Well, I would say that spiders that are fun to hold, we're probably looking at mostly Phidippus and other closely related jumping spiders. Something in the Saltaceae. Um, Salticids, I should say, the Salticids. Salticidae, is that it? It's the Salticids, the jumping spiders. Something in that group. My microphone's getting crushed. Um, they tend to be the most fun to hold, I think, of most spiders. And yeah, Mr. and Miss Morelia, I'm super excited about it. Also at the expo in May, we got to hang out for a little while with Clint and Apollo, another of his super dwarfs, and Richard Bilbo, who breeds the retics, and that was fun too. That was what really sold my wife on him, was getting to hold Apollo. So I am very excited about it. Caleb, you have a 19.8 melanistic retic. That's fantastic. I'd love to see that. The buggy gal. That is a good question, the buggy gal. I haven't kept ball pythons myself, so I don't feel particularly qualified to provide a lot of direct care information on them. Uh, So there are a lot of people out there who do have a lot of experience with them. One would be Lori Torini, who we just did a live stream together about snakes and misconceptions in the reptile hobby. She'd probably have some good ideas about ball python husbandry and the best ways to heat them. And Tobias, welcome back. Good to see you. And Tea and Fish Keeper, glad you like the background. I do too. It's kind of fun, and it's not a virtual background. It's actual fabric, which is, I think, kind of fun too. Okay, Tobias finally got some papayas and zebras, having some of them die off. Suspect it's a little bit moist in there. Okay, zebras do like a dry area. Make sure you get a gradient. So they need a moist area, but they also need a dry area. They really appreciate that. Papayas are a little bit more flexible that way, but providing a gradient for them is not a bad idea and may help. May not be the issue, but Laura Taylor, that's awesome. This jumping spider was not happy to come out of this 10-gallon you were cleaning up, huh? Any update on the tricolor babies? Well, Braden, I went back to look for tricolor babies and I didn't find any the last time I looked. That doesn't mean there aren't any in there, but I didn't see any. So I may have to look more thoroughly. And Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, do the snakes that you have, do you mostly just have the Morelia genus, or do you have others as well? Because yeah, the super dwarfs are super amazing. Whoa. So Therapod hunter, Phryganistria huzai yentwensis. I'm not familiar with that species. Tell me what you got there. That sounds interesting. I'm glad that they hatched. And Kazumi Rose, hello. So monitor plays, I see what happened. If the apparent wild type births some Punta Cana, then it probably was a Punta Cana, because Punta Cana, of course, throws some wild types. I think just having magic potions and Punta Cana together, it's a little bit of a stretch to call it magic a gem mix, but I don't know. When I sell gem mix, I try to make sure there are at least 3 or 4 different types represented. And Tobias, that's probably a good idea. Yotaro, glad that you have recovered from the mouth surgery. That's awesome. That cannot have been fun. So I'm glad that you're at the end of that. Ah, Kevin, good point. If you are using belly heat, thermostat is very important. All right, Caleb, gonna go feed your snakes. Cool. Oh, Armadillidium pictum are fast breeders, huh, Therapod Hunter? Cool. Serena, welcome. So, Aaron Boggs, for you, I recommend Porcelionides pruinosus, the powders. Hopefully that microphone is not getting buffeted too much. For your leopard gecko enclosure, those are the ones that I've used most extensively for leopard geckos and seem to be a great match for leopard geckos. Not that you couldn't use others, but I think those are some of the best. So Tobias, now unless the milkbacks you're talking about have, as far as I know, they can't breed with what is considered Porcelia laevis from the U.S. stock. So depending on where you are, and I don't remember Tobias, and I think maybe we've talked about it before. I don't remember where you are, but if you are in Europe or some place where you have access to the wild types from which milkbacks came, which is probably not the same thing we refer to as Porcelia laevis here in the US, then it is possible that they are crossing with wild types. If you have them with US uh, wild types, then they're probably not crossing. Okay, so Mr. and Miss Morelli have mostly Morelli, which makes sense. Coastal jungle, inland carpet python, and breadlays. Also a boa and an African house snake. Okay, so a specialization, but a little bit of branching out there too. Cool. So Therapod hunter, they're giant stick insects. Cool. They exceed 1 inch when newly hatched and about the length of a forearm. That's fantastic. So Monitor plays, are you still happy about it because you got 19 magic potions for $1 US? Well, there's that. And they may have crossed with something else. And Monitor plays, yeah, you should definitely feed vampire crabs some isopods from what I read. I can't say that from personal experience, but Warren McMonigal says that vampire crabs do better when they are fed isopods frequently. And Joseph Tevere, hello, welcome from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Awesome. So Sirena has the yellow dots, extremely prolific and doing well in a high gradient environment. Yeah, that makes sense. So Tobias is just getting all black milkbacks. Interesting. So you may have a throwback situation where uh, the genetics changed a little bit, maybe a mutation back to the wild type, and which is dominant over the, presumably dominant over the milkback trait. That's a possibility too. And if you don't want that happening, then I would recommend probably culling out all the wild types into a different bin or something. So Kevin, yeah, powder oranges are really good at teleportation to other bins. They're one of the best ones at that. So that is part of the reason I eventually converted all my bins to, or very nearly all of my bins to um, lids with no ventilation unless it was covered with fine, like breathable medical tape or something like that to prevent that, and it does help. It doesn't necessarily completely remove it, but I also keep my Porcelionidae in one part of the room, kind of separated from my other isopod types for that reason. And giant canyons would probably do okay with your leopard gecko, probably pretty well. I keep giant canyons with some of my garters, and they do pretty well. I would just say that the leopard gecko might eat more of them than it would the powders, but it probably would be okay. And because the giant canyons and the powder blues, or whatever powder you decide to use, have substantially different niches in that the giant canyons tend to burrow, and the um, Porcelionidae, the pruinosis, don't tend to do that as much. You might end up with them cohabitating fairly well. You'd have a better chance of doing it with those two species than you would with some others. Oh yeah, and Tobias, the white, what is called the white lavis in the hobby, was isolated from dairy cows, so it's probably not true lavis, just like dairy cows probably not true lavis. Who really knows? But um, that's how they were isolated. So you have a pretty good chance of doing that, and they do throw those fairly often. Marla found a lemon blue an entire floor above their enclosure. Yeah, that would blow my mind too. That's crazy. Ruben found a Pseudomythoca frigida, a really cool species, but I wish we had some of the big fuzzy velvet ants like you in the West. Oh, so this is a velvet ant species from your area? Is it, that sounds cool. I'm not familiar with that species. So Mr. and Mrs. Morelia, garter snakes are so tempting, but would want three of the same sex, but different localities to raise them together. Too many to choose from, though, and tough to get them all at once. Well, true enough. True enough. There are too many to choose from because there's so many beautiful garter snakes out there. But it's smart to do that with the three of the same sex, different localities. Um, and it is easier to get them all at once if you just kind of put your feelers out there in the spring, um, to one of the breeders and say, I want three different types, and you can set it up because they tend to be born pretty close to each other. Um, through May and June, it's pretty common. Some maybe April through June is when the most common births are. So you could probably set it up. But yeah, choosing the type might be the most difficult because there are a lot of breeders who work with a lot of different snakes. But I love the fact that I can keep garter snakes of different localities and even different species together and they're fine. I now have, let's see, I have, well, there's one surprise one that I haven't revealed yet. That's a uh, fairly recent addition. But I have radix and Sertalis and Sertalis parietalis. And in some cases, I'm keeping more than one type together. But of course, not mixing and not hybridizing them, but just keeping like males or just females together. And it's working really well. So if you haven't seen, those of you who haven't seen the Oddity Noir on Instagram, check him out. Um, if you look at any of my recent garter snake videos, it'll have a link to his Instagram and whatnot. He does Instagram posts where he'll have, like today he did one. He had several different kinds of snakes and he's holding them together. He had a urethristic, high red albino, and just an albino, and I can't remember which types, but he had a bunch of types in his hand, and it was really cool. It was like taste the rainbow. It was fun. Hmm. Okay. So Serena, yeah, I'm thinking because the giant canyons burrow, they might do fine with the prunosis at least for a while. So CRD looking into snake options for a 30-gallon pair of garters do fine. And what about a Mexican milk snake? Obviously not in the same tank. Can't really comment too much on the Mexican milk snakes. There's so many different milk snakes of different sizes, and I've looked into it, researched it a bit myself, but I can't recall offhand, you know, uh, the size range of the particular milk snake, and I'm not sure which type you're talking about, but there are some amazing milk snakes out there. Some of them are pretty small, some of them are pretty big, so not sure about that one. You could do two male uh, garters in a 30-gallon easily. 30-gallon with a female garter or two female garters would be a little bit more restrictive just because the females can get pretty big. But two males would certainly be fine. And it also depends on the species too, because garters do vary in size with species and whatnot. There are some really small species of garter snake and some really big ones. So uh, something to think about. But you could definitely do two males in there if you wanted to. Sorry, I got lost a little bit in my. Um, Marla, there are jumping spider species that mimic velvet ants. I actually have one of those, at least one that looks a lot like a velvet ant, whether it's actually mimicry or not. another question. But I have P. ardens. Looks like it could be mimicking a velvet ant. Um, and Mr. and Mrs. Murley, yeah, thank you. The melanistic garters are so beautiful and they're getting so big. I need to feature them in a video again. They've grown quite a bit this season. So Tobias, what are the chances of cohabitation in rat snakes? Um, well, I've heard of people doing it. I haven't cohabitated rat snakes before. Corn snakes are actually a type of rat snake, but I haven't cohabitated them, so I don't know. It's a good question. I've seen people do it over long periods of time, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily terrible, and it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best thing to do. I feel like I missed some things up higher, but it's hard to keep track of all that. Dope critters. You made some milk chocolate zebras. That's pretty cool. High white chocolate zebras. Love it. So the Mark II medic. Are you having a hard time finding springtails? Interesting. Even I live in a fairly arid area and I find springtails. I posted a big bunch of springtails that I found up in the hill flipping rocks here a couple weeks ago, and um, found them. Found some. A couple people told me they were probably Entomobria unistrigata. So maybe you can still find some, but I would say order them online. They're very easy to ship if there's a thing that you can, if that's a thing you can do. So Gretel wanted to know if same-sex garters can be introduced to one another as subadults or adults and still cohab harmoniously. Yeah, in general, I've done it several times and it doesn't seem to be an issue at all. I wouldn't say that that means you can always do it perfectly easily without any trouble, but I will say that I've done it a number of times without any trouble. So just keep an eye on things if you do it. Of course, it would be vastly preferable to quarantine any new acquisitions first for a reasonable period of time. But that's it seems to work pretty well for me so far. And I haven't done it hundreds of times, but I've done it quite a number of times without any difficulties. Various ages, sometimes bigger snakes with smaller snakes, snakes that are closer to each other in size. It seems to work. So Kevin say keeled scales make melanistic garters look like they're covered in black velvet. Yeah, they kind of do. They're a matte black, sort of Batman sort of black. It's really cool. Oh, monitor plays. You centipedes in the garden, but when they're in the shower, you catch and sell them. Why not? If they're going to a caring hobbyist. Why not? It's a better place than the shower, right? So Ruben Daly, how's your succulent bonsai doing? Recently got in the habit of starting enough to stress out my parents. Still have it. Still have it. It probably needs to be clipped, but yeah, I've had it for many years now. And since what, 2009, 2010, something like that. Still have it. So the spider boss, I do keep a few millipedes. You can get a giant African for a reasonable price. I haven't looked for giant Africans for a while, so I'm not sure where the best place to get one of those for a reasonable price would be. Um, they are getting better in the, they're getting more common in the hobby. I wonder if Boogie Down Bugs has some. Not sure. So Tobias rescued a tarantula pink toe. He was missing a leg and went into pre-molt for about 6 months. She grew it back entirely, but it's skinny. It is normal to grow the limb back after a molt for spiders um, in general, including tarantulas, not just true spiders. I know that's normal. The 6 molt pre-molt, I'm not sure, but then again, I don't have any experience keeping that species. So not sure what to tell you there. Therapod hunter, been thinking about getting some moon jellyfish, but I'm told they're not very exciting. Yeah, I'm not sure jellyfish could be characterized as exciting. Beautiful, maybe mesmerizing to watch is a better word than exciting. I've thought about getting some too. Critters and more, welcome. Good to see you here. So Scolopendra morsitans, monitor plays, or a Scolopendra paradoxa is what you find. Cool. Scolopendra paradoxa. I'm not as familiar with that species. I'm kind of aware of morsitans. But okay, so Frank the Tank has kept tarantulas, keeps tarantulas, so that's some good information. They'll grow back a leg in one molt, they'll be a bit skinnier, but look at it as it used to in the next. Makes sense. So Ruben, you see sea jellies in the Hudson River 50 miles from the ocean. Wow. Okay, some more support for the idea that they will grow back limbs. Yeah, cool. Yeah, I don't know about the premolt length seems to vary widely with species, with individual, with age, with a lot of things. Um, so I don't know that I don't really have any specific information. Oh, the buggy gal. So would this isopod plastic model kit be something, once you put it together, it functions like a dangomushi? You could make it Congo bait. I think that would be really cool. You get to put it together. You'd see how it articulates and everything. I would like that. That'd be pretty fun. Yeah, Tobias, I wish I had some more information for you, but I want to make sure that everybody knows that, I don't have a lot of information on that. Yeah, yeah, okay. So lots of tarantulas can be in premold or even not eat for a couple months and be just fine. Okay. 6 months seems like a long time, but oh, Wally, isopod coloring book is a really cool idea. So the bigger tarantula, longer the premolt. So Laura Taylor, can most reptiles, amphibians eat powders? I need to get rid of some, but I want to do it locally and just advertise for food. I guess. Okay. Small, appropriately sized reptiles and amphibians, a lot of them will eat powders. Uh, they're small enough that there are plenty of medium-sized to larger reptiles that are not particularly interested in them. But reptiles and amphibians on a smaller size, a lot of them will eat them. Silver Tears volunteers to make the coloring book, and Frank volunteers Wally to make the coloring book. Oh, that's true. The Buggy Gal mentions that Microvarium has the Isopod Explorer book that has a coloring section. Ooh, Silver Tears works at a small aquarium / museum and is doing coloring pages for work. Cool. So Therapod Hunter. Plastic model kit diagram with a giant tarantula terrorizing a power plant and a mantis attacking a train station. Whoa. Sounds like something I totally would have done as a kid. And I think you're right, Marla. I think a coloring book for isopods would be a hit with quite a few adults. So CRD thinking in the 30-gallon common millipedes, Oniscus ocellus, earthworms, springtails with a deep substrate layer. Is this overboard for a cleanup crew? Well, I always have the thing I worry about with millipedes is that their repugnatorial fluids could possibly cause damage, especially if they really populate the tank heavily. Could be a problem depending on what type of toxins they have and whether or not whatever lives with them is going to cause them to release those toxins. Could be a thing. Earthworms, I feel like, go through the substrate so fast and process it fast enough that they're competing with the isopods quite a bit. I would probably, if it were me, and I'm not saying your suggestion is wrong at all, I'm just saying if it were me, I would probably use one species of isopod and springtails. Oh, someone got arrested for smuggling blue death veining beetles in your country. Ooh. Oh, that's sad. Can you get superworms in your country? I feel like superworms are not the same as blue death veining beetles, of course, but I feel like superworms are actually pretty fun to watch, pretty day active, kind of big compared to uh, superworms and stuff, or to mealworms. Yeah, it does. The snake was holding the microphone. Dope critters. I see there's a super chat. Are you doing the next enclosure build off with Snake Discovery? If not, what can we do to get you on there? Well, I haven't been invited to it as far as I know. I think the best way to get me on it is to just have people suggest it. If enough people suggest it, I think Snake Discovery might invite me. But I don't know how many. I think a few people have suggested it, but probably not enough for that to have happened yet. But I'd get a huge kick out of going for sure. So if I get invited and I can make it, then I will come. So Dead D, do isopods self-regulate their populations? Kind of worried about being overrun with them. That is a valid concern. You need to make sure that you have ways to take care of that. I would say that you can, it's not just that isopods themselves will regulate their population, but you can environmentally regulate their population to some degree by regulating the space you give them, regulating the food type and the food quantities you give them, and things like that. So that is a thing. Okay, and thanks again for the super chat, dope critters. Really appreciate it. So Tobias recently told that the superworms he purchased from most mainstream sellers are actually mealworms pumped with growth hormones that make them infertile. Thoughts? There is something called a giant mealworm, and superworms are sometimes called giant mealworms, that have been treated in such a way that they keep growing and apparently have difficulties turning into beetles and so on. I've heard about that, but that's not the same thing as superworms. The superworms are pretty easily distinguished from mealworms in a lot of ways, but the beetles look nothing like, well, they're black beetles, but they're very different in shape and very easily recognizable as separate from mealworms. So I have never purchased superworms that were giant mealworms. I think I purchased giant mealworms once or twice, and I don't think I ever messed around with trying to get them to pupate. But yeah, the superworms that I have purchased, I haven't purchased them in a long time because I've been breeding them so long, are definitely a different species. It's definitely Zoophobus atratus, not Tenebrial molitor. Frank the Tank. Yeah, having locusts being a more common feeder in the US would be awesome. I talked to someone at length at an expo a while ago about that, about locusts. They were breeding locusts as feeders, local locusts as feeders. They talked about it, and it doesn't sound all that hard. You need very well ventilated enclosure. You need like a heat lamp. They provide lettuce and some kind of dry chow to them, and containers for egg laying, and it worked really well. I do think they had to provide diapause for the eggs, if I recall correctly, but it seemed pretty good. I was very tempted to set something up. They used like a screen enclosure. So I think it would be neat to get that going. So random tea, any way to get rid of soil mites and isopod bins? There are a couple of ways. Generally, you don't need to get rid of soil mites if the soil mites usually don't cause any problems. You can add predatory mites that will eat the soil mites. That's one way to do it. So Yotaro cohabbed a trio of corn snakes for almost 10 years. Okay. And it works if you feed them separately. Yeah, good to know. Ruben, congrats on the American larch seeds. So Tobias, I'll tell you what, to get the superworms going, this is what I do. The superworms. I have a 20-gallon vivarium, I guess, with there's about 3-ish inches of Biodude Terra Sahara in there. Keep it pretty warm. It has a heat lamp on one side, and they are. Sorry, I got my microphone caught in my glasses. That's fun. I have substrate. I feed them regularly. Make sure they get some moisture added to the substrate and a variety of foods, and they just breed in there. The beetles pupate in there because they can dig their own little pupal cells, and works great. They produce lots of babies. When I have an excess of beetles, which I do occasionally, I can move them to another container, do essentially the same thing on a smaller scale somewhere else, but they work really well. And Tennyson, that is a great point. The Wisman mealworms, you can get those from roach crossing. Um, Kyle has a friend who's, I think Kim Wisman is his name. He's been in the insect hobby forever, decades and decades, and he selectively bred these mealworms for generations, and they're quite a bit larger than normal mealworms, and they breed just fine. So I've actually thought of getting some of those from Kyle. So thanks for bringing that up, Tennyson. That's a whole other thing that we should probably have more of in the hobby. Dope critters. Are camel or cave crickets good feeders? Haven't worked with those as feeders. I think some of them probably have potential that way, but I haven't worked with them. So Rich Buddy started a beetle habitat for 6-year-old. Oh, excellent. Blue death feigning, stink beetles, and woolly darklings. Sounds like a good assortment. So Tobias, springtails eat fungus fly larvae. So if you have a fly problem, is a quick fix, just more springtails. I don't know if springtails directly eat fungus gnat larvae or not. Generally, springtails help outcompete the fungus gnats. If you have a very robust population of springtails, you will have fewer problems with fungus gnats. I think that's fair to say. But it doesn't mean that necessarily the fungus gnat larvae will be eaten by the springtails. Yeah, you know, we need more videos about mites. We really do. Okay. Well, Tobias, the beetles and superworms are pretty adaptable. As long as you don't get them too cold or really, really bone dry, they're pretty adaptable. And even you can even keep them on a pretty dry substrate as long as they have moist foods to eat, like bits of potato or sweet potato or zucchini or carrot or something like that. But that's what I do to breed them, and it works really well. You'll get guides that say all sorts of things, and I'm not saying those guides are wrong. There are different ways to do it. You know, a lot of people suggest, and this works just fine, is to remove the larvae when they're big enough to a small container like a deli cup or a film canister or something, put them in the dark in there without any food, without any water, and they will generally pupate after a while in there, a week or 2 or 3, so on in there. They'll pupate, and then you'll have a beetle, and you can go. So that works. I just haven't had to do that because the setup that I just described works for me, and the beetles pupate on their own. They're fine. Dragon Udo, it has been a while. Glad to see you back. So yeah, Tennyson, I want to get some of those sometime, those Wisman mealworms. Maybe we can do a trade for something at some point. Yeah, so Tennyson, I remember Kyle was talking about that at Roach Crossing, was whether Kim was saying it's just husbandry. I'm just taking better care of these worms. And Kyle was saying, no, it's probably not just husbandry. It's probably some selective breeding. And it might be some of both. So Therapod Hunter, trying out the Infusoria culture. Awesome. Yeah, you definitely shouldn't look forward to the smell. It is not pleasant, but they are effective in getting those tiny fry going. And Dragon Udo, yeah, those buffalo beetles are prolific. I've raised them too. I was sold them as what was it? It was Tenebrio obscurus, the dark mealworm, and it turns out that they were actually the Alphatobius diaperinus, the buffalo beetles. So I kept those for a few generations, I think, but then they were not what I was looking for, so I stopped raising them. but they certainly have their uses. They can be great. It's a cleanup crew. They can be great foods for a lot of things. They're not Tenebrio obscurus. They're Alphatobius diaperinus. Okay. So Serena dealt with the fungus gnat problem by spraying peroxide on nearby plants. Yeah, I've heard that you can spray the hydrogen peroxide on the surface of the soil to control fungus gnats with houseplants. I don't know how that would work in things like isopod bins. I'm not sure whether that would be problematic. Potentially could be. But I think it's a good tip for the houseplants. Oh, that's cool. CRD, this guy just sold the predatory mites with the houseplants. Cheaply, that's good, because a lot of times when you buy predatory mites online, they are expensive. I like the rove beetles. I've tried the rove beetles. I am currently not sure if I have rove beetles, but I did introduce them a couple of times into my enclosures, and I think they made a difference. I'm just not sure whether they're still around, but I do use the catchy traps as well, and they definitely reduce fungus gnats. They probably also reduce a few of the rove beetles. But I see what you're saying, Serena. Yes, if you have houseplants with fungus gnats, it's basically a source area for fungus gnats to keep reinfecting your isopod bins, even if you get the isopod bins, you get the gnats under control in those. Just going to bring up this too. So that's a good point, Serena. Thank you for that. You can use the Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis mosquito bits, soak some of those in water and use that water to water houseplants and also in isopod bins, as long as you don't directly put it on isopods, and that will kill fungus gnats. Very effective at killing fungus gnats. People like Ashley Neville use that, and it very effectively controls fungus gnats. I've done some limited experimentation with it, and it does seem to be really good against fungus gnats. I haven't gone with it wholesale in my isopod bins, but other people have, and it seems to work for them. And snails forward, there's a way to do it. If you have lots of carnivorous plants like sundews and pinguicula, the butterworts, then fungus gnats are just a happy snack, right? So Tennyson says the thing that's helped me most is freezing the substrates. There you go. Most of the fungus gnat issues have been derived from infestation in topsoil or potting soil using substrates. Yep. And the buggy gal used both the mosquito mix and the sticky traps. Cool. And the gnats will come from outside for sure. So it's not something you can just completely fix once and then never worry about it again. So Tobias, the Zevo flying insect trap. I haven't tried the Zevo flying insect trap. I do have a couple of catchies, but I haven't tried that one. I'll have to try that. Glad Random T that the catchy is helping you. And Red Lily Dragon, hello and welcome. Welcome as well. We have a good number of folks here. We have 41 people in the chat, looks like, and 33 likes. Can we do another like? And we got a super chat from Mr. and Mrs. Morelia. I really appreciate that. Always a great supporter of the channel. What can I say? That's awesome. Just some support, and I love it, and I really appreciate it. And Ruben Daly, a quote I heard one time about fungus gnats is, you mess with the monstera, you get the drosera. So the monstera being the large plant, sometimes called the Swiss cheese plant, and the drosera being the sundews, the carnivorous plants that eat small insects, including fungus gnats. That's cool. And Tobias, so the Zevo works with light, kind of like the catchy does. Is it kind of a ultraviolet light, or is it a different type of light? And I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, Catafigo. Been learning a lot. Oh, you're welcome. And the buggy gal, yeah, if you do a monthly watering with mosquito bits, even if you don't see them, that's key. you're not only treating existing ones, but you're preventing other ones from gaining a foothold that way, because that'll handle the larvae. Okay, a blue nightlight device with a sticky back. Okay, that makes sense. So Sirena isopods probably will eat the mosquito bits. So you can, I don't know that it will hurt them to eat the mosquito bits. The thing that will hurt them, in a study I read, said that if you you have enough concentration of the liquid and you spray it directly on isopods, it can kill them. And I've heard at least one hobbyist mention that too. It will sometimes kill them, but if you just make sure it's not going directly on the isopods, not a problem. Isopods ingesting the mosquito bits, they are basically corn granules that have been laced with these bacteria that are not dangerous to isopods if they are ingested, so that shouldn't hurt them either. So Therapod Hunter, are there any websites in your area that sell live native butterflies or moths? I bought some rusty tussock moths and my dad allowed me to put a few flightless females onto his apple tree. Cool. I don't know of any that do. There may be some that do. There you can buy, I think it's painted lady butterflies locally at the butterfly biosphere that's not too far from me. I was kind of tempted to buy some last time I was there. I didn't, but okay. So it refers to catching a soda at a concert. Cool. I didn't know that. Off topic, do you know of any people that breed chameleon geckos? I'm trying to find a good number of breeders in case I get some in the future. Frank de Tank. Okay. So Frank de Tank, what's the scientific name of chameleon geckos? Because I think I might know somebody, but I need to make sure. Are we talking about the same species? I need to make sure, or the same genus, because the genus I'm thinking of has a couple of different species in it that people keep. So there's the chameleon gecko, and then there's the false chameleons, and those are quite different. Thank you, Laura. Great to have you here. So yeah, the Cuban false chameleon is quite different. So the buggy gal, yeah, I think it was a large concentration in the study, buggy gal, that they used. The highest concentration caused some deaths. The lower concentration didn't. And if you're diluting 8 kernels in 14 fluid ounces of water, that's probably not strong enough to do that. So, Uridactyloides, yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of. I actually know somebody, so if you want to message me about that, Frank de Tank, then I will let you know someone I think is still working with him, and you could maybe make some contact. Dragon Uno, your dairy cows made a comeback. Excellent. Yeah, I think those Cuban false chameleons are very funny. Very interesting that they're largely snail eaters in the wild, and they don't necessarily need to eat snails in the wild, but I mean in captivity, but very interesting that they're such a deliberate, sort of slow-moving, ponderous sort of lizard, and they eat snails. It's kind of fun. I guess it makes sense. It's holding on. Now, I'm going to double check and make sure I didn't get any comments on Patreon, as I actually posted it kind of late, so I don't think I did, but I'm just going to double check because I don't want to miss anything. If someone did post a question on Patreon, I definitely want to make sure I cover it. Hmm. 1 second. Hmm. There we go. Nope, nobody posted there. So critters and more have some Theloderma bicolor mini mossy frog tadpoles about to emerge. Love to trade some for more breeding stock if you've heard of anyone else who keeps them. Cool. Well, if I hear of someone, I'd be happy to help put you in contact. don't think I know anybody. Oh, sorry. I'm stuck here. Oh, that's why I'm stuck. Kind of tight. Woo! Woo! Took a little dive there. Good thing you were right close to the ground. But got caught in things and jumped off of me. But it's close enough to the ground. Luckily, the snake is long enough that wasn't too much of an issue. Not ideal, obviously. So how old is this corn dragon Udo? Let's see. We got this corn when it was about, I think it's going to be about 5 years old in August. It'll be 5 years old, I think, where we're at. Oh. Yeah, I've seen the chameleon geckos, and I thought they were pretty interesting. They look kind of like little raptors, and they um, they're very unique. They have a very unique pattern to them. They're interesting creatures. Yeah, yeah. Maybe lay off the parkour, little guy. He's about 4.5 feet long right now, somewhere around there. Maybe a little longer than that. And he is a little cute little snake. Love the colors. I think he's hypomelanistic. We got him as a bought him from someone who needed to rehome him. He's going off to college, and he was a pretty young snake at the time, about 14, 13 months old, I think. He was 13 months old when we bought him from them. And now he's big enough, he's quite small at the time. It wasn't eating very often, because when a snake, a corn snake is very young, they need to eat more often than they do when they're adults. This guy right now eats about twice a month, which is appropriate at this size. But at the time, they were feeding the snake about twice a month, which is not really adequate at that age, and so the snake was quite small. But we started, we increased the feeding schedule a bit, and we were able to get him to grow quite a bit more. So Sabid Burb, what is your favorite wild-caught isopod colony? I don't have very many wild-caught isopod colonies. I do have a few. I have let's see, Stylisticus convexus is one of my oldest wild-caught colonies that I caught in my backyard. I also have an Armadillidium vulgare night gold that I caught nearby, not in my backyard, but caught nearby, the founding members of it. And is that it? That might be it. That's all I can think of right now. The night gold's certainly the prettiest, I think. The wild-caught stylisticus, I like them too, but they're not as striking. How hot was it today for us? It was actually not a hot day today. I think we only got up to 86. It was not very hot. Here I consider it hot when it hits 100 or more, which is not terribly uncommon in the summer. So, yeah, I think this was a cool day, relatively. Kermit the Frog song. I should practice. Uh, I can sing like Kermit the Frog once in a while, but I have to get into the groove. You know what I mean? I'm not quite in the groove right now because I've been speaking my human I'm on the screen voice. Wow, Serena, you rescued one from a tape trap nearly 2 years ago and you still have it. That's cool. Oh, Nazatum pearls. I love those. I have some Nazatum pearls. Got Nazatum pearl, Nazatum whiteout, Nazatum orange, Nazatum peach, and Nazatum candy mix. So Tobias, if you mentioned that you were in a minute ago, you mentioned where you were from, where you were at, Michigan. You're not seeing any, huh? Interesting. So a little over 100 and you're part of Texas, Dodo. Yeah, that's getting there. Yeah, there's a lot of cool isopods out there. Wild types of of various things can be super cool. You know, I really love one wild type that's not a morph that I really like is the Porcelio Hoffman's Egg Eye Black. The way they look is just amazing. So Cody, you got 89 in Washington, and in Washington it's quite humid too. So Dodo, you've already gotten up to 115. Wow, this has been a cool summer for us. Typically by this time it's gotten a lot hotter than it has. This has been a very, very cool summer, very wet winter, very cool summer for us. Oh, Tennyson, your Dirty Pride project, I've heard about that. Just got your first generation. So are the the first generation that they produced also, do they carry the trait of Dirty Pride? Oh, sorry to hear about your magic potion culture crashing. Yeah, they do like a moisture gradient for sure. And the orange expansus, meaning the expansus that have orange skirts, right? Not they have gray bodies but orange skirts. I've heard that they are a locality. Yes. Oh yes, I figured you meant you were fixing the gradient first, buggy gal. And Rodney, I'm glad you were able to catch the live stream. Okay, so Tennyson's still all white, so may not be able to tell if they're pied or not. And Serena, there are white Hoffman's egg eye. The one I've seen is Biggs. Chris Biggs, the mad aquarist, has some what appear to be leucistic Hoffman's egg eye. I don't know how many he has right now. It's been a year or two since I talked to him about it, but in my video about Hoffman's egg eye, Porcelio Hoffman's egg eye care guide, I have a clip from Chris Biggs showing his couple of his white Hoffman's egg eye. So that's what you got to check out. So Cody, friend setting up a 40-gallon red-eyed alligator skink. I usually hear them called crocodile skinks, but it's a common name, so I'm not surprised that it varies. I'm wondering what kind of isopod would be good as a cleanup crew. Good question, because it seems like they would probably eat some isopods. So you'd need to be, and they live in kind of moist, sort of cooler, temperate to rainforesty kind of setup. You could probably do Porcelio dilatatus, the giant canyons. You might try Porcelionides pruinosus because they do well in almost anything. So those would be a couple of species I might try. Not that I've kept the red-eyed crocodile skinks, though. Dragon Udo. Let's see. Do you think separating my darkest dairy cows will breed even darker, or at the very least only produce dark? I have seen some people work on a project where they line breed for certain traits with dairy cows, where they do a high expression dark and a high expression light, and they do tend to be able to produce higher expression darks and higher expression lights. At least that's what they report. I haven't tried it myself, so I don't know. But I saw someone said, here's some pictures from some of my ones I've been breeding for more dark, and here's some I've been breeding for more light, and they looked like that's what they looked like. So that was pretty cool. Sabid, a Hoffman's egg I found in Australia. So did somebody smuggle them in there and then they're breeding there? That's crazy. Well, random tea, you could probably use Cubaris marina because they like humidity, but Porcelio dilatatus do well at high humidity, and so do Porcelionides pruinosus as long as they have good ventilation. So that's kind of why I was suggesting those. You could probably try Cubaris marina, but they're more likely to nibble plants, which might not be great in with red-eyed crocodile skinks because you want the plants to do really well. And I think the Cubaris marina would end up nibbling on the plants a little bit too much. A wild type Hoffman's egg eye? That sounds really weird. Them to show up in Spain and Australia. I wonder what's going on there. If it's another species that just kind of looks similar. That's weird. Well, oh, Hoffman's egg eye orange. I would love to get those. I've seen photos of them. They're like magnificus, but easier to care for. It is about that time. I need to go, but thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Dope Critters and Mr. and Mrs. Morelia for the super chats. And um, congrats, Dragon Udo, on your son finding the chromatogaster. That's cool. Everybody have a good one, and check out my next video on Friday.